I think one show that sticks out to me regarding that is The Flash. When Barry, when he traveled, multiple times throughout the show, and whether it's intentional or not, he created some scenarios on his own to uh, to make changes in that timeline. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter. I mean, at times, like he faced uh, some of those villains and stuff when he went through the time portal, and who knows what the end result would be.
I'm glad you brought up the Flash because he adheres to different rules of time travel than we're talking about than Endgame. He went back, he created that timeline, but then he undid that timeline by
Mm-hmm.
going back and undoing essentially what he did to create it in the first place. That created a third timeline. Then when he returned to the future, it was the future of that timeline. But the the problem with that is when he went back to the future of that new timeline, that's still just one possible future. Traveling back to the past is different from traveling to the future. When you travel to the future, it is one out of infinite possibilities, infinite choices, infinite decisions to be made. One possible future. So even if you went back to that future,
Mm-hmm.
it could all be a lie. It doesn't really matter. It could be something completely different. It could be something completely similar. But the timeline that you came from, your friends and family, from that timeline that you know, love, and admire, those people are no longer in your life. When you go back to the future, the new, in this case of Flash, they've got characters like Cisco and Caitlin, or the scientists and the the superhero enthusiast, we'll call him, the techno guy and the guy behind the chair, and so they might have
Orson Welles,
a
yeah,
right.
Professor Doctor Wells, man, Doctor Wells.
Oh, Dr. Wells, oof, don't even get me started. So
Watch the
those,
Flash, everybody. You'll watch the Flash, everybody. You'll
yes,
enjoy
they're on
Doctor
season
Wells.
9. Season 9, last season. Can't believe
Sure.
it. We started watching it. I started watching it in high school. I don't know about you. For me,
Oh, I
it was
started
hopefully
watching my senior year of high school, like
yeah,
literally. So it's like it's crazy how long it is. It's been almost 10 years. So,
yeah,
but yeah, the
amazing.
purest example of time travel right there. So yeah, definitely,
Yeah, amazing. Too bad they didn't go to season 10. That would have been really cool. I wonder how they're going to end it. But anyways,
absolutely, yeah.
excuse me. Anyways, in that future timeline that you return to, those people in your life may have a similar conception of who you are. Now, they might know who Barry Allen is. They might have a relationship with Barry Allen. But quantum speaking, vibrationally, that is not the same Barry Allen. Because
Mm-hmm.
another thing we got to think about is, all right, so you go back to 1964. Let's say you decide to spend a couple of years there and go back to the future. You would be going back to the future, first of all, a couple of years older. And depending on when you went back, let's say you went back to the time that you left in your previous timeline. There would be two of you. There would be two of you because in this new timeline, theoretically, unless you really screwed things up, you were still born and you still, let's say you still went time traveling. You would have to go to the exact moment that you left or shortly after, and you would be returning 2 years older or a couple of years older, however long you stayed in the 60s. And those people, your friends and family and everyone around you, again, will have a similar notion of who you are, but depending on what you changed in the past, could be very drastic or it could be very similar. But either way, your vibrational code, your vibrational frequency on a quantum level would be different from the one that they know, from the Jake that they know. Because the Jake that they know, let's say they went back in time as well. Alright, so they go back to their own new version of 1964. And it just becomes that loop. It's a time loop, but it's not really a loop because it's a zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. You go, oh, there's the camera. You're here, you go back to 1964, you go back to the future, future you still goes back to 1964, zigzag back to a new timeline. They go back and forth, so it goes just back and forth to different timelines. And so that's part of why infinite, that's where the multiverse comes in. Infinite timelines, infinite possibilities. That's where the infinitude comes in on a quantum state, on a quantum level. The idea that a atom or a particle or a string, we'll say a string in this case, could be in multiple places at one time on a multi-dimensional scale. So that's what would be happening here is your string, your quantum string from your timeline cannot return to the vibrational timeline that you came from. And so you would have to, even if you went back to the future from 1964 and you return to a timeline in which, say, you were never born, maybe you messed something up in the past, or let's say this could be exciting. You go back to 1964, you spend 30 years there, so now you're 30 years old. You go back from 1994 to where you left at, say, It's 2023. Let's say we invent time travel next year, 2024. So you go back to 2024, and depending on the timeline that you go back to, again, it's one possibility of infinite decisions, infinite variations, infinite possibilities. The Jake of that timeline could have decided not to time travel. It was a split-second decision. They could have, or maybe not split-second, because they have to go through the work of creating time travel. But it's still a decision. What if something goes wrong? What if this? What if that? What if you can't time travel? You could be going back to a future in which you don't time travel. Now there's two of you. Now there's young you that's never time traveled before, and there's you 30 years older, and you come to that timeline. Now what? Why go back to the future? Why stay in the past? Either way.
Do your parents ultimately meet?
Yeah, you could maybe you go and explain to your family, explain to yourself, hey, I'm you from the future, and but things are gonna be different. You're not gonna. You're now 30 years older. You're probably gonna just continue your life that be on your own terms and let little 20-some-year-old Jake live out the rest of his life. There'd be no point. There'd be no point in the time traveling.